And I'm not going to read his whole bio, I'll give you the short form. He is an urban planner, an attorney, and an economic development practitioner in the public and not-for-profit sectors. And his career has spanned more than 25 years. And he's had a variety of managerial responsibilities and successful project implementations in Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton. But most of his career has been in the public sector, in regulatory, economic development, and city management. He is currently the zoning administrator which is a division of the Buildings and Inspections Department for the city of Cincinnati. And so he has delivered institutional reforms to the building permitting and zoning administration processes and regulatory reform. So I invited Matt here today. I had heard his presentation on how to access cages and work with your building department, and I thought it was really good and stuff I didn't know, and then I thought maybe that was something we would want to know. And he'll partner with Stephen Mingus, and I'll introduce him when he comes up. So, thank you.
I need your mic. So, I did this, I had to visit Clifton Town meeting about a week ago, and I just kind of walked in cold and was basically a machine gun with 10,000 questions about da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it was kind of, what do we do, how do we do it, I don't understand, I don't remember, whatever. So I basically, after I listened to about 5 minutes of Q&A about what I was possibly going to talk about for the next hour, I basically said, okay, there's basically one simple rule in dealing with commercial property and the physical changes to it, which is basically, if you're changing anything on the property, you're likely going to visit my department. It is truly that simple. If you want to change the use, if you want to rebuild the sign, if you're going to be doing interior remodeling, if you're changing a system as a part of the building, there is really nothing that's going to be constructed on the property that doesn't come to the building and zoning department, period. And I hate to say it like that, but it is really that simple. So when you, as citizens and staff, start hearing, I want to change, stop. And the second piece is, our staff wants to be your resource. We don't want you guessing at what the city will say. We would rather have you know how to route them and where to get into the right cues and right portions of the city. It is not really your job. Your job is to support your neighborhood, to cheerlead, to fill the spaces, to get the development flowing, the people on the streets, the property sold, and people doing their daily business well. What your job is to know where the Rolodex is, not to answer the question. Some people will say I wasted my very expensive law degree, but there are a few little tidbits I came away from that too. The $100,000 piece of knowledge, that's an excellent question, I'll get back to you. Lawyers are taught never to answer on the fly. Why? Because you don't always remember everything. You don't remember the exceptions, you don't remember the latest change, you don't remember the policy implementation that happened last week necessarily. And so, again, if I have to know it every day, you touch it tangentially, why should we expect you all to have it in your head, all the nuances and the arcane pieces of what ifs that exist in all of our laws and regulatory processes? So for you, do your cheerleading, get excited, know some of the basics that we will talk about to help you kind of get oriented. But once you start looking for the last answer, that's an excellent question, I'll get back to you. If we're physically changing something, we're going to end up going downtown and talking to the folks, at least in buildings and inspections, at least. And that's the other piece, it's least. What we do try to serve, particularly in my group, is to try to be the project managers, the facilitators, and the triage specialists. That's what the investment has been with my group. And again, if we aren't sure what any physical change means, it is any of those functions. Any form of construction, not just a new building, but additions on the back or gutting the whole floor. Again, demolition, key importance. Actually, a lot of people don't think demolition is important, but demolition is important to the property owner because if we don't take the permit, the county keeps taxing the building until it's gone. My permit is the trigger to the auditor to get rid of the asset. So there's a value to a demo permit. Changes of use, and especially if it's something that you can see as significant. Office to store, store to restaurant, storage to anything that's more active. If it's something that's not kind of, if you can't, as a pedestrian, see sort of a like for like similarity to what's there and what's coming, there can be complications in the building code primarily that may trigger a host of challenges. And almost all of you are probably dealing with more likely redevelopment than development. You're likely changing from something that isn't being used very much to wanting to be used a lot. And usually in that scale, that spectrum of use, the more the property goes from kind of benign and quiet and inactive to busy and loud and populated and lengthened in hours and uses and complications, the more the change triggers building changes. It triggers ADA requirements. It changes fire separation and suppression requirements. It changes exiting requirements. So and because it's all about life safety, building used well, and so forth. So you can't shortcut on these things, and you don't want to lead people into a black hole, and then to find out, oh my God, this building is very complicated, and it looks so easy, and then here's 5 line items that just put a couple six-figure dollars into your budget that nobody was anticipating. And maybe they signed a lease, maybe they purchased a building, maybe they've already gotten a loan, and now you find out, oh, we didn't account for blank, blank, blankety blank. And the city's gonna tell you, it's not opening if it doesn't get blank, blank, blankety blank. And someone's sitting there with an empty pocketbook. So the goal is, ask early, get the line items in order. Hopefully some of the things we're gonna present to you today are some helpful aids. This one's pretty quick. So mostly, in my world, zoning by general definition is just how do you use land. It's a very, very broad and kind of simple concept. It's mostly basically about permission, general permissions. These are typically about intentions, and this is usually not so black and white because zoning is basically something that is contextual. It is something that communities, whether it's the city or your individual neighborhood, have kind of thoughtfully talked about and processed. It can be changed pretty rapidly at any given time. Again, if intentions change, your desires of what the community should be change. The zoning code can be moved to that intention, as opposed to like a building code where everything's very black and white. If you do this, then that. So that what it doesn't do typically is it doesn't necessarily manage what most people want us to do, which is manage behavior. Most of the time, we talk about behavior is our problem. We say, oh, the zoning, that bad bar, that bad auto repair place. It's not necessarily that auto repair is bad, it's that actors are bad. It's that people don't take care of their stuff. They're not neighborly. They're not courteous. They're not using golden rules as we would expect them to do. But the challenge is zoning typically can't get you what you want, which is that police power of making bad people act good. So we will try with the laws we have to do as best we can. We also, on the same faction, you have to remember, you can't use zoning to be, you can't use zoning to control the bad guys. You also shouldn't make zoning decisions based on personality either. I love that owner. We will do anything because that owner is involved. Zoning is a property right. It lays with the land. It carries on after the owner. You have to, when you ask questions about zoning and intentions and anything we talk about with zoning, you have to say, I like this no matter who is here. I like this no matter if they're a great actor or a bad actor. I like this for the long haul because it could last longer than we will. As the people running this organization, as the people trying to make decisions for this community. And so try to always be careful of that. Watch, you're falling in love with the human and not discussing the use. And when you're looking at some of the things you're deciding, what on those tangible, quantitative things can you do to ensure that the property is appropriately used for the idea in question, whether it is the good actor or the bad actor? And what kind of bright line tests can we use to measure who are good actors and bad actors? So it's, again, not cults of personality, but it's basically contracts and rules of understanding how people should appropriately act. Many people haven't probably realized the significant change that occurred in July of 2015. The city made a very conscious effort to reorganize our regulatory regime as it related to development. We spent a significant amount of time separating and rebuilding the planning department versus the buildings department, and realigning property maintenance and code enforcement out of economic development and back into buildings and inspections. So when you're dealing with the city, the two things to remember is there's functions that are legislative and administrative. Legislative functions are the types of things where you want to talk about your intentions and you want to change or do things different based on those intentions. You want to change the zoning code where the code affects everybody in the city. You want to change the zoning map, which could be the whole city, or as like the West End has just done, or as Roselawn has just done, intentional changes in specific areas where they wanted to. The West End just changed a big chunk of general manufacturing into urban mixed. They had an intention. They knew that the general industrial was a host of bad actions. It was not conducive to some of the people who were wanting to spend money. Quite frankly, they had a lot of older building stock that people wanted to use residentially, and the code said no. And not only did the code say no, the banks said no. The banks said, we don't finance prohibited zoning uses. We're not going to spend money rehabbing that 4-story walk up into 3 apartments and a retail use on the bottom because the money is made on the residential and the residential is prohibited. So that community, through intention, went through the city and got the zoning code amended. So anything that is done that is legislative in nature, you speak to the city planning department. You want your neighborhood plans changed, you want zoning code text amendments made, you want zoning map amendments made. You work with Catherine Keogh-Jers and her department to get that done, to get that organized, to get those hearings organized, to go through now the major projects and economic development committee, and ultimately ship it to city council, get it done. What you do if you're dealing with the property day in and day out, the administrative functions, the permitting, the variances, the how do I interpret a specific property with a specific question, you come through our department. So the day-to-day interpretation of the law, how it applies to a specific piece, and how we get a project through. Again, if it's very micro and it's very much tangible to the place, that's our group and our division in buildings and inspections. And again, the other piece we have actually been trying to do is also and the last note is provide feedback to legislative, because quite frankly, when you work it every day, you know where all the problems are. So hopefully we are, and again, I think this will be maybe more evident with Ms. Keogh-Jers in charge. I think we will start to talk about where the gears don't mesh and the words don't work and where I give away too many variances, so why is it a law if we ignore it every day? Because again, in appropriate administration, you don't overlook law when it's there. You don't pick and choose your friends and say, I love you, I don't care about the law. I hate you, I'm going to enforce the law. Nobody thinks that's fair. Nobody thinks that's just. And quite frankly, it's not protecting you as it should. If we don't like the law, we change the law. We don't ignore the law for our friends. So, Moving on, zoning administration is one of 3 divisions in our department. Basically, we serve as equals. My group is a very small group of our 100-odd people in the building. We have about 8. But the other parts of the general building inspection group and the PMC group. In PMC being the property maintenance code enforcement inspectors. Basically, we're, again, about 1/3 of our employees are building buildings, 1/3 of our building people are doing quality control, quality of life, property maintenance, and 1/3 of us are interpreting and or running the department. So that's basically how we operate. Again, as I just said, the 3 core functions are 1/3 of us interpret, mostly leading through my group, along with building plan examiners. 1/3 of them are watching the buildings go up, the stuff that actually got the permits, and making sure they comply with the permits. And then the aftermath and the day-to-day operations of nuisances and so forth are handled by the enforcement group, which is the enforcement. If you've not met managers, Eugene Lackey is now our man in charge of GBI. Excellent man, love him a lot. I think we're seeing great results. And in enforcement, that's still Ed Cunningham, who has been with that unit for a long time. So again, those are our 3 core groups. The thing that I would hope you all find when you work with me or my staff is that we are not the guys that are going to say no. We are the guys that are going to try to get you through to the yes. But as I said, we're going to look for solutions. We're going to attempt to get with you early before people spent money, signed contracts, done stupid things, gotten in a black hole. But we want to catch issues early, and we want to find reasonable solutions. We want to try to do it as best we can in the law. And if not, we're going to talk about where it's appropriate to be talking about waivers from law and how to get through those waivers. Again, I have a group of 8. Right now we have 4 plans examiners as well as myself. We purposely and intentionally hired a communication specialist for the department because nobody talked about the department or from the department or with the department. We never said anything proactively, and we usually didn't have our answer together when we asked about anything not proactively. We've used one of our staff as a business facilitator, and I'll talk about that in a second. And for those of you that deal with historic conservation, the whole historic unit is under our wing as well. Oops. Okay. So again, our philosophy is when we know we're in redevelopment, it's all about change making. A lot of things didn't work right before. The law doesn't necessarily line up with the realities. A lot of times we're trying to make good decisions that are in between. Again, sometimes the goal is not always what we get in the middle, so how do we work those incremental changes to continuously improve our group? I will say, as in my years of administration, I have never been in a more supportive organization for change making. You can say what you want. I know we're having fun in our downtown, but I never would have thought the Titanic could have been turned so much in such a big organization. I normally work in small city governments, and I thought we were progressive. I was amazed how much we were allowed to move in the right direction. So that I will get off that soapbox very quickly. But I will tell you what we've done since we've restaffed, because if you remember, really there was no zoning staff for 10 years in the department. And so we really weren't covering the questions well. Mostly we had no ability to do customer service. So basically I have one person on the phone every day. They're normally answering 35 problems a day on the phone. We again, just as a reminder, my group probably truly services half of the permitting. We do 10,000 permits a year. So at least my folks touch 5,000 of those permits in some way. Since the city in 2017 handled same-day permitting, which is most of the minor permits, tenant changes, signs, all those little things that used to say, well, they never get my permit done, it's way over the state limit, all these problems. Well, no, actually, no. If you actually sat and waited your turn, you could probably be out in 2 hours on your permit through buildings and zoning. And right now, about 35% of our permits now are same-day issues. So no, your little project is not waiting behind Children's Hospital anymore. If you want to get through fast, you have the ability, without paying extra, to get through fast. You have to have good drawings, you have to know what you're doing, but you can do it. And again, my group spends a lot of time on preliminary zoning letters. So what is it we think we need and what are our challenges? We will itemize those things and let you know what your challenges are, and then you can choose to say, do you want to fix it to the law or do you want to go ask for administrative variances? There are a few products we offer: zoning verification letters, certificates of compliance, and certificates of appropriateness. Zoning verification, you generally want to know if something's allowable on a piece of property. Can I do a tattoo parlor here? Can I do transitional housing, or some forms of group home on this site? Is that form of industrial going to be in that district anymore? General questions, general answers, usually checking on also if there's code compliance issues, any forms of problems, any outstanding permits. Zoning verifications can do that. It is a fee service, but you get an answer. Certificates of compliance. I have a very specific idea and I'm relatively certain of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. It may or may not even have a building component involved. Do I want a seal of approval from the city or a guarantee that what I'm doing is accurate and correct? Yes, we do those. We do those letters. We do those for people before they tear down the building and replace it so they don't destroy the asset and find out they can't have the answer on the other side. Again, we do that for some of those questionable uses that you're not certain if they always fit. And for basically $106, we can tell you it's certain, and if you did it in this way, it'd be perfect. See you later. Go sign the lease, go buy the building. Historic appropriateness, again, when you have those design review pieces where you're really wondering, is the right window the right way, is that door frame right, are those proportions right? We do those again as well. Again, we handle between urban conservator and the zoning staff, we handle 350 kinds of administrative hearings a year. So 5 people technically. So 70 cases per person we're running these things through either the zoning hearing examiner, which is most of the city, or again in the historic districts, the Historic Conservation Board. We also do courtesy inspections. This is kind of a new project. So you've got that old building, you got that tenant, you got that old warehouse that hasn't been anything, and it's going to be the best nightclub in the world. Courtesy inspections are bring your design professional, we'll bring our zoning guy who runs the project for us, we'll bring your building inspector from your neighborhood, we'll bring a plans examiner that will likely do the permit. If there's any other weird departments that might need to be there, like health, when it's been food, we'll bring health, we'll bring fire, we'll bring all those people on the property, walk the building, talk the idea, and say, oh, well, the consequential act is, if this, then that. Now, do you want to pursue it? Do you want to modify the idea? Do you want to do that all before you pen the architect? You write the check to the architect, and the architect draws all the drawings, and then they send them downtown, and then they get into the revision pile in 15 days or less, because we now offer all reviews, or 90% of the time, everything is reviewed in 15 days first time. So after the end of the 15th day, you come back with a bloody set of plans. You don't want to do that, but you probably want to invest in a nice meeting for an hour and a half on the property, talk about the challenges, talk about the consequences, let the designer come back to the applicant and say, well, that line item now is in here. We can't ignore it, and we shouldn't ignore it because it's going to get caught. And it's not going to get caught in the middle of the permitting process. And it's not going to get caught after the permit's issued because nobody asked the right question and the building inspector shows up and said, you didn't account for this. No one depicted this. Now I'm going to sit here and say we can't finish this project because now you have to amend it on the fly. And amending on the fly sometimes is the wrong answer because we could have maybe made a very calculated decision 3 steps back and avoided that problem. Pre-developments, if you're really doing something that's kind of consequential and usually site development versus building reuse, again, applicant comes in, sits in front of all of the departments in one room. All of the departments talk about the consequential acts. We form the list of to-dos. You know pretty well where we stand. Owner knows how to revise or work forward, and the city is going to deliver a relatively concise opinion. This is actually looking to be changed substantially by our new fiscal year. I will just keep the word coordinated site review in your head, because that will probably be the word that follows the new system. The last big thing here, and I'm moving slower than I should, so I'm going to have to speed it up. Use is not the question, is it zoned properly, is not the end question. It is the first question. Because again, use is the permissive state. How it's applied to the property and the building is the specific. And so often you can get yes as a general zoning question, but you're gonna find the roadblock is, and how is it applied on this piece of property? And how is it applied to the building as it exists today? So that when you're all talking and asking about use or directing people is not only the first question of can I generally do it here, it's can we specifically do it here? So don't allow yourself to think that the question of the city is one question. It's, okay, that this leads to this, leads to this. Because there's a lot of these other standards that can trip you and trick people into a problem. And so this kind of reinforces that again, zoning is an allowance of the use, but the execution of the use is what the rest of our department does. And again, verifying assumptions, working with us is the best way to do it. This is just a philosophy statement. I know my director will let me say it time and time again. We are not here to say no. We're here to say this is the way that it can work. So don't be afraid of us. It's better to ask and let us be your Sherpa through the trip, as opposed to being the guy that plants the landmines on the trail. Again, if you touch our zoning code and the Muni code, if you type Muni code Cincinnati, that's usually how you get to our municipal code. Again, just as a trigger, unless you are Walnut Hills, College Hill, Madisonville, or Westwood, and are looking at working in those business districts, ignore Chapter 17. Just ignore it. Chapter 14 is where everyone else works. Chapter 17 is form-based code, very limited area, really only their business districts. If you're not touching them, I would say ignore it. You'll be happy for it. But I know sometimes when people come to me, they say, well, in Chapter 17, no. Everyone else lives in 14. So unless you're for special neighborhoods. A couple things when you're dealing with us in the administrative and variancing capacities. This is really important because I think a lot of you have to try to decide what to pay attention to and how important it is. So in the world of variancing, there are degrees. The degree of the request is based on the type of variance it is, which are the list up here. And the degree of how hard it should be to get to it increases on each one of these. So when you're looking at our code and you see somebody's asking for a special exception, it's a tiny little thing. Can I take away 2 trees that I'm required to have? It's really little minutia pieces. Variances, when you see the word variance, usually it's dimensions or numbers. I'd like a 5 parking space variance from my 20 space requirement. I would like a 3-foot setback variance from my 15-foot setback requirement. It's usually very dimensional, very quantitative, and usually pretty. Again, they should have a show hardship and specific need, but because again, the standard is there's supposed to be a level of test, not just I want it. I want it is not a good reason. We aren't kindergartners, so we're not handing out lollipops. If people don't want to do the law, there has to be a good reason why the law shouldn't apply to them, and they should make that case. You're welcome to help make that case. You're welcome to show and champion good reasons, and there are a lot of times are very good reasons. But it's not just, because I really want it and be really nice is not really the standard for variances. Conditional uses are when something can be a nuisance, and we should ponder the nuisance and understand the possibilities of nuisance and ask the question, have we used good development, physical development and operational rules to make it as not nuisance as possible? The best example, typically most neighborhoods have our outdoor areas and the patios, because patios, if it's too big, you have to go ask. If it's going to be open too late, you have to go ask. If it's going to have outdoor entertainment, you're going to go ask. And so when you have those, is it appropriately sited? Is the neighbor 6 inches away from the patio? What are they proposing on the entertainment? How late is the late going to be? And that question are we balancing the project, and can you solve it appropriately? Urban design overlays, some of your neighborhoods have basically a design guideline standard. Again, when it goes to hearing, it's got to be either new construction, tearing it down, or something that's so radical the building won't look the same when it's done. Otherwise, it's done by my staff. So again, little things we do internally, guide them to the best, get out the door. If it's radical change and the buildings will look totally different when it's over, you're going to end up in a hearing. Last is use variance. White elephants in the wrong spot. Churches in the middle of residential neighborhoods. Stuff that really its old use doesn't really fit anymore. Use variance is the hardest thing that should be asked for. It should be given the least often. It's usually the one that with it connects the most conditions and should be the most conditioned. Basically, this is conditional use on steroids. So the point with these is that when we talk about them, is it really appropriate to do? Are we tightening the boundaries as tight as possible? And again, what are the physical things we can do to help manage that solution? So I think I'm going to stop at this point. Let Stephen take on some stuff. I think his let's get there. I think when we talk about using the property, some of the other stuff we can talk about, and we've got a couple case examples. Oops.